Thank you for joining us at this panel that is aiming to address several questions, and I'm not really sure that we will manage to do so. One of those are actually related to the rights of platform workers in this part of the world. It also relates to the questions that I will ask Vasil. So are we really special? Because when we started our research, we thought that there are big differences between the platform work characteristics compared to the EU. We'll tackle also the question of digitalization and how it really impacts on the workers here in these parts of Europe. And in the end, we are going to ask the question, is AI helping or not? As I've said, I'm not really sure that we are going to get the answers to these questions at all, but at least let us try. So Vasil, my first question is actually directed to you. When you think of specific traits of platform work in this region, is there any? I mean, can we, for example, say, yes, there are three very particular features of platform work in Southeast and Eastern Europe? What would you say?
Yes, Branka, first of all, thanks for the invitation and apologies that I was not able to join in because of an operation to join in live in Belgrade, but I hope that you enjoy the city. Yes, my argument would be that we are different. Of course, it's very difficult to set boundaries. What is covered by Southeastern Europe? But we are different first in terms of the issue about atypical work. So very often in Western Europe and North America, actually, there's more and more evidence that platform work was used in order to circumvent labor legislation in some cases. And it led to a fragmentation of employment and to violations of rights of workers and self-employed. But we have also evidence from countries outside Europe, outside North America, that platform work can lead to some positive outcomes. For example, access to larger markets, access to better incomes. Actually, this afternoon, I'll be speaking with my colleagues about the Etsy platform in the Balkan countries. We have very interesting evidence to bring. So here we have also, for example, in terms of on-location platforms, different types of workforce. And very often we have people, as our research in Bulgaria, but also in Serbia, but also colleagues in Hungary, or outside Southeastern Europe in countries like Slovakia have demonstrated at least part of the platform, for example, for food delivery, offer conditions that are really similar to the conditions of couriers in the delivery companies. They have open-ended contracts and many other requisites that could be more qualified as elements of decent work. The second, I think, characteristic is that here we had, at least at the beginning, and Branko, you mentioned it at your speech at the start of the work this morning, a lot of people that of highly qualified specialists, IT guys, web designers, and many others that joined platforms for highly qualified work. And actually, we had research already from 2016, 2017 in Bulgaria, showing that in many cases it was a question of personal choice. And these guys were able at this moment to get better conditions in terms of pay, in terms of flexibility, compared to what they would have if they would be employed here. And I think there is something, of course, that we cannot develop through this session, but it will be probably a topic that will emerge in social sciences, sociology, it's the different aspects and dimensions of flexibility, because very often just the lack, for example, of open-ended labor contracts is considered in Western Europe as a really problematic issue. But we can see that in many spheres, I work here in Southeastern Europe, it's not the open labor, open employment contract that leads to stability. We have many people, and I'll give you just one example before closing my point now. If you take people, for example, from the state companies like the Bulgarian Post, and I would imagine that in many other postal services in the Balkan countries, they are really low paid. Many of them are have very bad working conditions. So despite they are in open and in the labor market contracts, they don't have good quality of work. So I think it's a big challenge also for social scientists in order not only to collect data, because we know that data is insufficient, but also to interpret this data in a relevant and meaningful way, not just importing concepts from abroad. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vasil. This really leads me to the next question, and this one is for Chetanka. So we've heard Vasil, and he pictured out different traits of platform economy and platform work in this region. So now I'm asking you how the rights of platform workers look like from the trade union perspective. You're one of the trade unions that have recognized the importance of this work like many years ago. So you've been really active in advocating for the rights of these particular groups. So what is your take?
Well, I have to say first, this division Southeast Europe, and I do agree. It's in a sense in Southeast Europe you have countries which are in EU and which are not. So after the adoption of the directive that we spoke earlier about, I think that we will rather talk about position of the platform workers in EU countries and non-EU countries. This will probably be the more adequate. Because, for example, I find more similarities in the problems that we have in the sense of the legislation with the Polish situation and Serbia. So one EU country and one candidate country for God knows for how long. But one of the similarities that we draw, because I strongly do believe that only unionized worker can do something for themselves, and only collective action can lead to something. Individual action can cause the incident, can draw the attention for a short time, but only collective action can do something. In order to unionize people, you need to have legal framework for that. This is what we are struggling. And for the first time in Serbia, I think we took initiative to draft our own version of labor law. Because there's a lots of workers, more and more every year, who are platform workers, and they are not covered by the labor legislation. This is the first problem. We have a problem here with the definition. We don't have a worker, we have employee. And I found that the Polish trade unions had a similar problem in order to engage the people. Since I'm not a legal expert, my colleague here, Stefan, is, but I will read it so that people understand what we found. In our current labor law, we have definition, person in labor relation with the employer. This means formal contract. And this is something that was almost similar to Polish experience. We propose to change it to have person who performs work at the employer. So no matter what kind of the contract is there or relations. The Polish trade union even go further, and they said person performing paid work, full stop. This means we can organize people who are working in those, I hate to say, precariat work. It's it's equal to unsecured work, because this is the basics for us how to organize them. You have to have a legal instruments how to organize them. Of course, we've been doing some alternatives, which I'm not going to reveal because there's a platform people here. But we are trying to find a way, even before the changes of labor law, how we're going to do it. Why we keep this employee, not the worker? Because in order to have a worker as a term, you have to change the Serbian constitution. So we thought that it will be easier to change a labor law than the constitution, but it might be that we are wrong. It might be that the constitution will be changed first because of some other reasons. So my main message is we can protect them if them unionize them. If we don't do that, it's not going to happen on the way that we would like to see. So the role of the state is you have to allow unions to organize people no matter what kind of job they're doing. That's the one thing. And the second thing, labor legislation needs to cover everybody who works for money. So our position is, let's not defragmentize the labor law. Let's put everything under the umbrella of labor law, if we can do that. If not, then we will negotiate separate specific laws. But the best scenario will be, let's put everything under the labor law. So nobody floating somewhere, not knowing where they are. And there are some good examples, which is probably for the second round that we might introduce and that we might say publicly.
Thank you. So my understanding is we have different kinds of workers. Some are happy, some are unhappy. Some are in informal and some are informal type of employment. But most of them are actually not recognized as workers because they don't have contracts. So they are, in a way, in a position, you as a trade union cannot unionize them because simply there is no legal ground for that.
Not just that, we also need to change the definition of the employer. Because one of the obstacles when you want to register them, for example, in the ministry, they said, but who is the employer? You know? So current definition of employer also prevent us to organize them. So that's why we are going to, and to be honest, I don't care from the side of if the states, if the governments can find solution how to collect tax from the platforms, they should find solution how to implement national and international labor standards. You know, how come that they first find solution for the taxes? Always makes me wonder.
I don't know. It's like, so maybe.
I mean, it's the problem that they need to dig deep. My right is to organize that.
This was not planned question, but thank you for raising it.
It's going to be unplanned question, so go ahead.
And that is exactly the point. But I'm asking now, Vid and Ivona, so who is the employer? If you can answer this question, that would be really nice. I know that UNDP has been dealing with digitalization and digital society for a rather long time. I mean, it's advancing this in locally and internationally. So how would you define who employer is if you would be asked such a question, as I actually just did?
So that's a very complicated question. I guess that the platform people who walk among us apparently would say that if I order something on Volt, I actually employ the delivery worker, which obviously legally doesn't make, I mean, legally it might make sense, might actually not make sense, but those platform workers have no employers. I would leave those questions actually to be answered to somebody who legally knows all the loopholes. For me, I would agree on a personal level, here, anybody who's in a power relationship where they're selling their labor and getting money from a central entity is employed by that entity, right? But again, I mean, this is a much more complicated legal question, because what do we do with self-employed workers, right? So you should have the right to be self-employed. You shouldn't have to have an employer, right? So you cannot curtail that right, right? So it's a little bit of a complicated question. I don't think that from my expertise and more on a technical level, I can answer it. I see the problematics, but I see also the obvious elephant in the room. They are working for that company. We cannot jump legal loopholes and hooks, but I did not employ my Volt delivery worker who brought me a hamburger, right? So it would be ridiculous, because otherwise they're not employed by anybody. Did they do it out of their own free will, right? So again, you know, so that's, but I guess that's my personal opinion. I'm not a legal expert.
I think that is absolutely fine. And Divana, what would you say?
Well, we have quite a number of issues when it comes to the definition who is employer and who is a worker. So we have, of course, then definitions in labor laws that are also different at the country level. There is an overall definition at the EU level, but I would say that independently of definitions, what we need to look for is protection of workers that actually perform work independently of the contract that they have. Because then, as just said, but the director Geleng, we also need to protect those that they want to be self-employed, they want to be independent contractors to deliver services to different employers, or they want to perform just service provision as a secondary job. So this definition, I believe, and well, I would also agree with Cedranka, if we can, under labor legislation, bring a broader definition of who is a worker and who is an employer, it would give also a ground for further discussion. There is also another element that has been brought forward just before this panel, is the issue of intermediaries. And this is something that we are observing right now. When we started even the research at the European Training Foundation in 2019, 2020, we haven't seen such a big role of intermediaries. And that they play this buffer, I would say, between the worker, between the platform, and the companies, as we heard yesterday in the keynote speech of Mark Graham, that actually in this configuration, then we also have a difficulty to define who is a real employer. And that's why, well, I would tend to agree with a wider definition and with protection for everyone.
Thank you. So I'm going to continue asking, in a way, same question from a different angle. What we noticed in our research is exactly what you, Cedranka, said. It is a definition and registration of platforms according to their real classification. But I'm not going to take this venue of exploration. I will ask you with, for example, when you think of digital and platform economy, how do you see it in terms of impact on society and in economic terms? Because we are very critical to the digital economy because of workers' rights. But what is your expertise telling us?
Well, I think this is part of the question that you kind of prepared, kind of slide into it. I believe that we're looking at digital platforms because they're so prominent and salient, but these economic mechanisms that we're talking about, they also extend to other types of platforms. And the risk of natural monopolies occurring in these markets is very real, and that's not good for competition, right? And this is why we all gathered here today. I guess it's the future of platform work because platforms have market power, right? Still, it's very important to dwell into the mechanics of why this is the case. Why do these platforms become monopolies and acquire all of this market power if we want to formulate effective and relevant policy responses, right? So platforms like Upwork or Glovo or Uber are what economists call multi-sided markets, right? So they bring different participants together. For instance, Glovo would bring together restaurant delivery workers and customers, Uber commuters and drivers, Airbnb people who have access to a property, people who need access to a property, etc. But there's lots of traditional companies which are also platforms. I think a very good example, which I will use throughout, are credit card companies, right? So MasterCard and Visa, their platforms bring together merchants and customers. Newspapers are platforms. They bring together readers and advertisers. Gaming consoles are platforms, right? PlayStation is a platform. It has a market of video game producers and gamers. And these multi-sided markets are noteworthy because they turn the traditional economics of the firm upside down, right? So all of the, and this has significant impact on competition and market dynamics, right? So we'll try to illustrate this with a very quick example because that helps. Let's think of a traditional business like a bakery, right? So if I open up a bakery, there's plenty of bakeries in Belgrade. I don't have to do a lot of work for it to attract my first customers, right? So I just open the door, I make sure my bread isn't too stale, and people from the neighborhood, they will come and buy bread. If I want to attract more customers, I will need to do more effort, right? So those next customers, I might have to do some advertisement, might have to look at what they like. If I want to reach customers across town, I might have to do even more stuff. Generally speaking, a fundamental assumption, in modern microeconomic theory, is that these costs increase marginally as you acquire more customers. You grab the low-hanging fruits first, and then later on, you get more difficult customers. At one point, I might have to convince the people who don't want gluten to eat my bread, and that gets very costly, right? And it's exactly this assumption, it's a mathematical assumption, which underpins all the good stuff we keep hearing about the free market, right? Because this is the assumption that allows for new entrants to enter. So if a company starts behaving inefficiently, charges too high prices, an entrepreneur will jump up, slapped by the free market, the invisible hand of the free market. He will rush into the market, create a new company, and usurp the Goliath, right? And this is kind of what we keep hearing. And the problem is that with platforms, this dynamic is turned upside down, right? So the costs of acquiring additional customers and users, as you have more users, actually decrease, right? So, this is due to network effects and due to cross-network effects, right? So for instance, if I want a hailing service and I'm picking a hailing service, I'm going to pick the one that has the most drivers as a consumer. Similarly, when the driver chooses for whom to work, they're going to pick a service that has the most customers, right? Similarly, let's go back to the credit card companies. Visa, it's everywhere you want to be, right? I'm going to use Visa because I can pay with it everywhere. Doesn't matter if the government pushes a Dina card, I'm not going to use it because it doesn't. So that Visa is more valuable to me the more merchants have it, right? And these are the upside down effects, right? This creates entry barriers to the market. Nobody thinks about, well, except us with the Dina card, but that didn't work out very well. Nobody thinks about creating a new Uber here if Cargo and Uber are already here. It's very hard once a platform, and again, this is both traditional platforms and modern digital platforms, right? They're all the same economically speaking. Once they reach a certain critical level, some people refer to the tipping point, they just assume dominance over a market. And if their costs of acquiring additional customers are low, they can undercut the competition. So nobody else can enter, right? So this is an issue. This is the main reason why we're here today. This is why they have market power. It's by design. And these companies are not doing anything wrong within the system in which they're operating. They're maximizing profits. They're supposed to do that, keeping the employees paid, the employees that work in the company itself, the other ones as well. It's by design that these platforms tend to converge to these monopolies, right? So I can go with some numbers, I
think that actually you pictured well the scene. So on one side, we have workers who are actually not recognized and not classified. We have companies that are monopolies. So relationship between the two is uneven. Ivona, you actually just completed the research in wider nearby European countries about platform work and features of platform work. So when you listen to all this, what would you say? Is it platform work a threat? Is it an opportunity? Who gains, who doesn't?
This is a very good question and quite difficult to also answer straightforward. But what we are seeing while discussing directly with platform workers, because this is the point, it's them, they actually tend to say that it's a great opportunity for them. And why so? It is happening, well, on one hand, because there are no other opportunities on the market. So they find working through platforms that is quite flexible. It's not time bound. They can choose the platform that they work. And this is why there is such exponential growth. Just to give you the number, but you know it very well, 3.5 times between 2017 and 2021 that we researched together in the Western Balkans. I would tend to say that now it would be 5 times in the Western Balkans as a region. And this is, well, we see this exponential growth all over. We are just completing the research in practically all EU neighboring countries. So we started the research in Eastern Europe, then we moved to Western Balkans, then to Southern and Eastern Mediterranean, and now we are just completing the research in Central Asia. And actually, what we are finding out that on one hand, the challenges are practically the same. And on the other hand, the opportunities are also the same when it comes to platform economy. And probably why workers themselves, they see platform work as an opportunity, because it gives them also access to international markets, where at the national level, they don't have so many opportunities. This is also very much linked because those countries, as we well know, tend to have quite a strong outward migration, particularly of young people. And actually, what we are seeing in our research that the platform work or online digital work can actually offset this trend. Young people, they either can stay or even come back. This is a very clear case of Serbia, that actually young people that are even studying abroad, they are coming back to Serbia to work. And this is why also Serbia becomes one of the leaders in the global, let's say, platform work. But we need to also think of different types of platforms, because we have those that they give opportunities to international markets, but then we have local platforms and the work when is delivered on location. And this is slightly different. And here we are seeing much more challenges, much stronger discussion also on legislative protection of workers. And where we see that really at the national level, policies can really bring an effect as well for benefit of workers, but also for the benefit of platforms, I would say.
And this is a phenomenal link to Vasil. So Vasil, if you were a policymaker, or you've been thinking about policy making in this part of the world, what would be your recommendation, given what you have said?
Yes, Branka. Just probably not to before giving some ideas, I wanted to remind that in this area, but as Ivona said, also in other areas, neighboring EU countries, there are a lot of actually online workers that work in the informal economy or semi-formal, or I will not enter into this debate. And I think that from this perspective, probably the first large challenge to policymakers in the region is to take these people out of the informal economy some way. And it's not an easy challenge, but Chedanka mentioned that, for example, if I understood well, the Serbian government find a way to make platform pay their taxes. So we know from many other countries like that there are good examples. The second challenge, I think, is that more and more in this region, we have evidence from Serbia, etc. There are people that for different reasons are engaged in multiple jobs. There are the so-called slash workers. And sometimes they can combine the opportunities of, for example, stable and secure job with some opportunities of flexible assignments coming from the gig work. So it's very, very difficult, and probably in parallel to the international, the local partners, what also I think we can, at least here in Bulgaria, observe, there are a lot of also work that is done through the intermediary of social media. There are a lot of groups on Facebook if you want of somebody to come to paint your apartment or repair your car, etc. And it's something that is outside platforms. So anyway, there is a need, first, I think, for policymakers to understand the scope. Yes, probably for the moment, even if, as it was said by Ivona, the number of platform workers probably was multiplied by 5 in the Western Balkans for the last 5 years. Still, it's not a big number. I think what is really challenging is that there is an exponential, probably under brackets, growth we will see. But still, to have an idea about this challenge, because very often, of course, the administration, for example, starting from tax authorities, etc., cannot cover everything, but so they should be aware of this increasing phenomena, and there are interesting practices. And of course, here unions, I think, can play a role not only by organizing, and I agree completely, Janek, it's an important, of course, we know from other spheres that unions were able, in a way, to associate people that are not workers, for example, taxi drivers, etc., and many other guys like this. So they call it forms of association, doesn't matter what is the statute of those people. But second, what we try to initiate here in the framework of research co-funded by DG Employment is to put together trade union activists, also with moderators of some of these freelance communities on Facebook, etc., in order to, because I think sometimes they're like two parallel spheres. And so basically, in order to summarize, the first, I think, big issue is to raise the awareness about these challenges among policymakers. And after that, probably not to invent the hot water, there are interesting solutions that have been already implemented here and there, and that work. And I think the countries here in the region, doesn't matter if they are members of the EU, like Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, or if they are candidates or in other statute, they can go ahead with these measures. So probably it will be also, and I think that one of the recommendations of these debates yesterday and today in Belgrade, there is probably also a need not only of exchanges between policymakers, between social partners, but also between the administrations. It's very nice that there are people representing the Serbian government at this conference, but probably all these guys, the Serbian, the Bulgarian, the Albanian government, should also sit together and exchange and find good measures that work and that are not overcomplicated. Sometimes we try to overcomplicate it. We have the very developed labor laws here in the region, but finally these labor laws and some of these regulations are not applied in practice, and this is one of the big problem. We know as social scientists, not just to have a regulation, but to enforce this regulation. Okay, thanks, Branka.
Thank you, Vasil. So again, Čedomka, first of all, how important is this issue of platform work and platform workers to you, to trade unions? That's the first. Second, do you differentiate when you think of platform workers and activism and unionization? Do you think, oh, we should unionize these freelance online workers, or we should unionize first on-location platform workers? Does it matter at all?
It does matter much more. I think that people say first. What Vid said, yeah, that this is great economics. Then what? You explained it, how important. Yeah,
we'll get to that.
But
we'll get to that point. This is a suspense.
Yeah. So from my point, I think it's very much matters. Is it local or international? First of all, it's a matter of reaching people. So those who are more to the international market, and they are not that visible. They are harder to reach, and they are they're more reluctant to organize because the nature of their work is mostly individual. They hardly communicate with other people, so it's really different. At the local level, in the context of is it opportunity or threat or whatsoever. There was an interesting article when I was preparing for this event, published in the Transfer, which is a publication of the International Trade Union Institute, European Trade Union Institute. I think that somebody from ETU is here. Okay, you're doing a great job.
Yes.
And there is a issue, the context in Georgia. And when they ask local drivers on the platform, why did you choose this job? Majority of them said, because there was no alternative of good jobs on the labor market. So this is not the first choice of the worker, right? The second thing that they said about this, I can be flexible, etc. Yeah, at the beginning. They said, I choose this job. I thought I will have one job in the morning and just 2-hour drive in the afternoon. And then I will spend time with my wife and my daughter. Primarily, majority of them are men with a university degree. And then they said, but then we realized we are not earning enough if we only drive for 2 hours. So by the time I end up driving 8, 10, 12 hours. So how to balance private and professional life? So first, you have somebody who is doing job which is not the first choice. Second, misleaded by the fact, oh, I am so free to work whenever I want to work, because mostly what platform calculate for payment is when you are driving, not when you're waiting for a call. It's same in Georgia and in Mexico. You know, so that's the second point. And third point is from the union perspective, when we are doing organizing campaigns, motivating people, it's very difficult to motivate person to join the union if he or she works on a job that he or she doesn't see as a future. So it's it's a totally different approach how you're doing it. So yes, we should do it. We should be also, let me be for a change critical to our unions. We should also be more open-minded. Yes, they're difficult to reach. Yes, they're not planning to stay there. Nobody is planning to drive a bike for 10 years, right? Or even less than 10 years. But the Italian experience shows that even though they are short-term jobs, when they start to unionize them, there's a big fluctuation of the workforce, but there's no decline. So as a union, you have to be always on alert. One goes, another comes. But we have that experience in Serbia also in this more classic industry, like because majority of our industry is labor intensive. And we have situation that in metal workers branch with the automobile industry is dealing with the components. People work 6 months, 9 months, and then they left because they are squeezed. They have no energy anymore. Those are the repetitive jobs. I don't know if you ever been in those companies. You can go 1 step left, 1 step right, and that's all 8 hours on your feet, unless you do overtime. So people can't do it for a long time. And we have situation that we're changing members every 6 months. People left, or every 9 months. So it's not that we are not experienced in this kind of work. So we have to accommodate. But the services that you're providing for the platform workers, they are much more different, and they're much more collective than individual. So, for example, you have examples in CGL in Italy, have a good experience in that. What they are doing mostly, it's training. Also how to be safe in the traffic and etc. So to raise health and safety issues. Another thing that they're even doing financial support in between jobs, but you really need to have serious money to do that. They also negotiate with some platforms, for example, food delivery. People expect that even if there's a flood outside, I'm ordering food, I paid it, you're supposed to deliver me, no matter that there is a 1 meter water on the streets. So they negotiated with the platform that in a case of really severe weather, driver can refuse the job, because you can do that even in regular jobs. So there are services which are new for us. Yes, we can link with the different associations. That's also true. But let's come back to the directive. Directive will never be adopted unless the ETUC as a global union invest into this. And it's a very significant that, I mean, I hope it's going to be 2 years for the integration in the national legislations. That's hopefully, unless we have a more right-wing parliament with more big business in it. And they might say, okay, we will have 5 years to integrate it in a national legislation. Then what? And then what with the candidate countries? Just Serbia, but the rest of the candidate countries. We hit the wall with the negotiations, right? We only closed 2 chapters temporarily. So union position will be, we don't have to wait until the European countries integrate the directive. Let's start to integrate things already. If we are harmonizing, if we want to do that, and let's do the Secretary of State said it's not polite to comment somebody who's not here, but I'm not going to be negative in that sense. But he said, oh, it's not just that we are transferring the directives, we are going to improve them. I would love to see that, how we gain even more. And yes, it's great to open jobs for 9,000 PhDs, but find them where? Let's start tomorrow to fishing out PhDs who are all around the world. So human resources are important. If we are doing, I can see now what you said, it's absolutely true from the union position. We will have to have strategies more focused on those who are doing things on a local level rather than on international, not just because it's easier, but because I think those are the most severed by this type of war. Am I too long? Sorry.
No, I find it very interesting because now I would just ask Ivona what her research experience says. I mean, is it like confirming the findings that Shadranka has from all different places? So you're fresh with
yes, actually,
findings.
very much. Our research confirms what we are observing also from provision of work and the demand of work is this huge polarization. So on one hand, we have top end of online gig workers that are highly educated. They work in especially ICT sector, coding, delivering all the services related to new technologies. Some for working and for writing and translation. And in the middle, we have very, very little. And then we have those that are working on location, delivering just services of ride-hailing or delivery. So here we also see from, well, this labor demand perspective, skills demand perspective, this huge polarization, which also links with then the policies, how we need to address the issues. Yesterday we heard that, well, we need to also think about this upstream when it comes to the global market. And I was very happy to hear that ILO is already working on it, but there is quite a lot to be done also at the national level. I believe that the directive at EU level will still bring a very positive impact because it addresses several issues. It addresses from, well, of course, the labor and working conditions perspective. It addresses also the issue of evidence that we discussed also before, because one of the actually main constraints that we actually don't know what is happening, because we don't have the numbers of workers and who those workers are. So we are conducting independent surveys. They are not very much representative because, well, there is no data collection, for example, through labor force surveys. And also then there is this misclassification, who is just a service provider and who is a worker. So from this perspective, definitely this I would say lower end and the more precarious work would need strong attention at also national level. We also looked from the perspective of skills provision. So here we also have this very strong polarization. So there is a labor demand for highly qualified, and those are actually the most happy to work on international markets. And actually, among the countries that are surrounding the EU, one of the main issue is payment, the salaries, because simply they are gaining much more in even national high-tech companies, because there you have these international rates that are paid. And those workers from really regions surrounding the EU are really competing very well. Of course, then we have the other aspect. Do we have enough people, these top level skills to perform the work? And then we have the discussion about the provision of education and training, because what we are seeing in our research that yes, it counts very much. So the skills pool that you have in different countries is very important in order to compete in this international market. The formal education is very important. Then, at the platform level, actually contrary to what we were tending to think, there is a huge skills development component. So people really develop top-level skills on the job. But then we have another problem. This is not well recognized. So even if you work an international platform, you don't get a certificate that you are super highly trained and very well skilled, unless you do some additional informal or non-formal training. You get a certificate, or you do a certification either through a platform or a top-level company like Microsoft, Oracle, etc. Which, yes, they do certify those skills. And then just to still complement on this on-location platform delivery and the ride-hailing services, as Dranka rightly said, we have a huge spectrum of also skills, and there is much bigger diversity of workers. So you can have very well educated people, and you can have people, well, with well, let's call them low skilled, not necessarily they are low skilled. And there also for those that are better skilled or well educated, they are actually losing their skills on the job, because when they are just delivering, of course they need some basic skills, basic digital skills, communication skills, etc. But here we see quite a strong de-skilling as well. And then, well, yes.
So because I think that now we are really like providing layers of complexity to the phenomenon. I wanted to ask a big question about differences in the region, but then I can ask that later. So what we hear on one side, we have differences in pay, we have differences in, classification. So most of them are not classified, therefore they cannot enjoy rights. Now we have a problem of de-skilling and skills that are not recognized. And in the end of the day, going back to the lecture from the economics, so we have companies that have a phenomenal power in local and global markets. So where are we going with this? If you can continue where we stopped.
Well, I thought to look a little bit at the data, what's going on in Europe, because as Vasil noted, if you look at Serbia and for instance, Bosnia, Albania, the number of these platform workers, and I'm, by the way, focusing on location platform workers. So the top tiles, I didn't actually prepare for that. First of all, the data is hard to find. And second of all, they tend to be very happy over there. They have very high rates as contractors. We're looking at these kind of like locked-in workers where we can imagine the essential workers, I think they were called Corona. So the thing is, like, the market in Europe is much bigger than over here, and it's much more mature in that regard. First of all, this whole game of consolidation, they're playing it. The couple of, Just Eat, Takeaway.com, Delivery Hero, etc. They're playing these, they're winning these markets in Europe. They're trying to consolidate their gains. And I think last year, for the first time, they started turning a profit, which generally in economics means that they have kind of consolidated their markets. And they were pretty radical in that. Delivery Hero is a German company that sold its German operation. It just exited its own German home market, right? They sold it. So we're getting this consolidation over there. And when you look at the numbers, I mean, the average revenue per user, I found some numbers on Statista. This was the only that had actual usage numbers and revenues. It's about 80 to 100 euro per user, revenue per user average in Europe, and over here it's around 20. It grew from around 15. So in Southeast Europe, and we're talking about user numbers that went from 18 million customers to 45 million customers between 2017 and 2024 in the European Union. And if we look at just, for instance, Serbia, Albania, and Bosnia, we're talking about a few 100,000 actually customers. Right. So what we can basically do here, considering the fact that Financial Times did say that they just started running a profit, it was an article that came out at the beginning of this year. I think we should observe what these companies in the platforms in the EU actually started doing. They have now consolidated their power. They're starting to run a profit. So now their actual behavior should come about. But in general, this market power, I mean, everything that we're discussing over here, there's another economic mechanism which actually leads to direct exploitation of workers. It's built into the system. And again, I'll use credit card companies as a good example. So another dynamic which happens is if you are a platform and you have multiple markets and you want to optimize your profit, you want to take from the market where you can take and subsidize the market, another market. So for instance, with credit card companies, you will take from the merchants who have no choice, they cannot leave, they don't want to lose customers, and you will subsidize credit card holders with cashbacks and bonuses and I don't know what, because as a credit card holder, I can immediately in a store decide to use cash rather than use a credit card. These same dynamics, so this is again economic theory. It has to do with cross elasticities of demand, etc., but the logic is simple. Customers will flee, and workers will not flee, or they're less likely to flee. So you just kind of take money from them and then you subsidize the customers, and then you basically optimize your profit. Again, these companies are not doing anything evil. This is their job. It's the entire framework which supports that. And there was another study, I thought you were going to cite that one from the European Trade Union Institute. This one, I really like that one because it's more of a qualitative study by Kirsten Jesnes in 2023, who analyzed what happened in Norway. So in Norway, there's a huge tradition of collective labor agreements, unionized workforce, etc. And then in 2019, there was one actor over there, it was Foodora, and in 2019, the couriers went on a 5-week strike. It was paid by the union fund. They negotiated their collective labor agreement, renegotiated again in 2020 and 2022. And that kind of worked. For a while, things were fine. But then during the pandemic, Volt came in, and Volt just exclusively used self-employed workers, right? So after a while, employees at Foodora couriers started reporting that now more self-employed couriers are being used. So again, you think of it this way. It's more expensive to have a unionized collective labor agreement workforce. So it's more expensive. But if you apply it to one company, then another company comes in, starts using that to give discounts to snatch away customers from the first company, the other company will be forced. It's a race to the bottom, right? So in that regards, I think that's the first learning in this regard. What we can do about it, first of all, any policy response should be market-wide. It has to affect every single company that goes there. You cannot create, I mean, there's a few players, they're very powerful, and all the incentives are there for them to behave in the way that they behave. It's by design. It's not evil companies. There's not some evil CEOs that go like, oh yeah, let's step on the couriers now. But it's just market pressures. Well, maybe there are, I don't know. I'm giving the platform people some slack. They walk among us, I heard. So in any case, and this goes both, for instance, both on collective labor agreements or, for instance, commission caps. Restaurants also don't have much of a choice. So if a platform decides to put a high commission on restaurants and then give discounts to customers, the restaurant can just lose their business or accept that. So again, this is a market power thing because restaurants have less choice. And there's multiple things that can be done about that. For instance, let's talk about that choice at the same time, about transferring of skills, transferring of reputation from one platform to another. That's one way to reduce that lock-in and reduce the market power of the platform itself. But I think, generally speaking, that country-wide regulation that applies to every single platform is the only way to go. Otherwise, you just create a system where you disadvantage one company over another, open yourself up for all kinds of messes, and you do not solve the problem in the end. Shortly.
So thank you. Vasil, now we are going back to this region because all that we presented, I think, is the same for any other place. Or maybe it is not. We'll find out later. So Vasil, when you think about our region and digitalization prospects, because you haven't been only working or exploring the platform work, you've been also researching digitalization aspects. So how do you see our future in this region?
In this region.
What's digital transformation is going to bring us?
Okay, it's one billion dinner question. But
how else?
No, of course, it will be very difficult to predict the future. But you are right, Branka. Platform work, actually, platformization is just one of the aspects of the digital transformation that is changing the world of production, but also the world of work in Europe, also including in this region during the last decade. I think that in parallel to platforms, what is really amazing in this region, and it was mentioned by some of the previous speakers, is the development of particular skills related to the different ICT professions in the ICT sector. There were, of course, some historical prerequisites, but we can see that now in the region that are several cities, most of them capital, but not only, that started to be enormous employers in terms of good jobs, and mostly speaking about jobs that are in the ICT or the business process outsourcing sector. Just take Belgrade, just take Sofia, just take Bucharest or Cluj, even Cluj more than Bucharest in Romania, etc. I think one of the issues is to what extent our countries or specific centers can keep young and talented people, because we have seen that in other contexts, unfortunately, those people probably don't stay in their particular countries, but leave. I heard an interesting example 2 years ago when I visited Albania. There are a lot of, for example, training centers for ICT for coding that are delivering directly skills to the German ICT sector, So those guys are trained in Albania, but they immediately take the plane. After that, within our regions, because it's clear that probably for Belgrade and for Sofia, we can do it for large university towns. And the big question for me and for part of my colleagues in our research is how we can create also such jobs, not only in the really big cities. And there are interesting examples, just to mention, for example, the northwestern part of the region in Bulgaria is the poorest in the EU. And actually, there are now some very interesting moves and examples of a city like Vraca, 100 kilometers north of Sofia, with a tiny ecosystem of ICT companies offering job is emerging. And I think that this in our region can create, of course, it's not a solution for everybody, but for example, in Sofia, from where I'm talking now, about one-fifth of the all jobs are concentrated in these sectors. And still, this sector needs support. This sector needs more innovation because for many reasons, part of these companies came here for or our companies integrated the global value chain because of the labor cost. But now the situation is changing because a lot of companies in the region are upgrading the value chains. So we need to of course, to support this because this can be, of course, not a solution for everybody, but this can be a solution to keep young, talented people and to make spillovers in other sectors. I think that some of these technologies are called not better, the general purpose technologies. So if we have an advancement in the digital technologies, in the developing artificial intelligence, in different computations, etc., if we have the necessary infrastructure, and part of this infrastructure, of course, is created by funding by national government, but also the European Union plays a strong role, especially in the EU member states. We can have a lever allowing us to converge towards richer countries in Western Europe. And there are actually, for many of the countries, take Romania, there are incredible jumps in terms of the increase of the purchasing power during the last decade and a half. And part of this is due especially to these highly technological sectors. So this is, of course, not all the result, but this is probably part of the solution for our region, according to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Vasil. All I've heard is platformization. I'm joking. So going back again to not really to the future, but what we can conclude based on the accounts that we have made. Çetinka, you're not only a president of the trade union in Serbia, one of the two representative trade unions, but you're also vice chair of the European Union Confederation. But my question is, if you're having monopolies on one side and we have companies that are really like big and powerful, and you work on national level, can really trade unions compete? I mean, how can you ensure rights of workers at all, given the setup that we have? As Reid would say, this is like by design. So they're not evil entities, but what we have here is the creation by design. So what would you say?
Well, of course we can compete. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't be here. No, it's the, if we try to see where we're going, I think with those monopolies in these sectors that can anywhere else, we are going to more alienated power. It's significant that the platforms didn't want to be recognized as a social partners when they during the process of negotiations for the platforms, and they are not members of the employers associations. Why? Because they don't need them. We saw that already on a formal jobs with the multinational companies. in Serbia or everywhere else, they are not joining local employers associations. Why? Because they can open minister's door or prime ministers anytime they want. They don't need employers association to lobby for them. So this is a huge power, and in any case, it's directly linked with the political power. Politics and money goes together. I mean, there's no dilemma about that. So for the unions, at the beginning, you're in a position 1 against 2. Vasil mentioned that the regional governments should try to negotiate certain elements together. He's absolutely true, because we need to talk about quality of life. Yes, it's cheaper for them to do this. Yes, it's more efficient to do that. But what about quality of life? I mean, it's very much complex. It's a health issue. You know, we as humans, we do have legs for reason, but we are less and less walking, because every day somebody said, oh, it's more efficient if you order, even if your pizza place, it's 500 meters from you. I have a neighbor, we have a pizza 100 meters from our building, and he constantly orders pizza to be delivered to him. I mean, I said it's 100 meters. You go there, you might meet somebody there, you know. And why even on 100 meters? Because this is designed to do. This is how people say, because you will say time. What time? 10 minutes time? I mean, it's very dangerous. I spoke recently with one of the employers. We spoke occasionally. And he said, you know, with this food delivery system, we almost can cancel a break during the working hour. So what do you mean? He said, you know, before this, people go out. They spend 15 minutes to go somewhere, to buy something, to come back, etc. So they walk, it's healthy, you know. But now they ordered food and they continue working. So yeah, it's efficient, but it's not good. At least not for those people. So we have to put, I'm expecting a really difficult debate next year in International Labour Conference in Geneva. It's going to be a really huge discussion. I'm already frustrated with this sentence, if applicable, that it's almost common sentence in Geneva when we talk, because otherwise employers wouldn't accept it. So we have more if applicable than real context on certain conventions. But then again, in Geneva, it's not going to be platforms who are debating and negotiating. It's going to be employers who are not organizing platforms. So this issue, who represents whom? It's the same with the unions, I have to recognize, because I am now talking in the name of the people who are not members of my union, at least not many of them. So this discrepancy, it's something that is going to kill us in a sense that we don't have a unified front, because all that we're talking about, how to make things cheaper and how to be more efficient, but efficient, cheaper for the employer, not for anybody else, and efficient in a sense to make more money, not that much efficient to make life easier, right? So this is, and even, I mean, cars without drivers, I love to drive my car, you know. So in the near future, it will be forbidden to say that you love that, because it's more efficient. It will be, and then they will say it will be less casualties in the traffic, so the cars will crash themselves. Okay, but innovation doesn't necessarily mean it brings quality of life to majority of people. And I think we need to reveal that. And it will be a huge discussion about this. And I encourage people more and more, be it members or not, let's talk about quality of life. And if all this doesn't improve quality of life, if it doesn't make us happier, more satisfied with our lives, then it's for nothing. And then it's a true. Absolutely. And if you go deep in your heart, you will see that this is a true, really. And if the future goes without enhancing the quality of life, then it's not something that I'm looking for.
Okay, but then what happens without that quality of life future? So I was talking only about labor rights, but you also combined quality of life, which is like another dimension. So you're making it more complicated for the region that is already like in complex kind of situation. Brief answer, and then I'm moving to Vid, because I'm just curious to hear his point of view when it comes to this complexity and tension between business model that we discussed and labor rights that we're discussing in this region in particular. So you two together.
Okay, briefly, yeah, it's a complex. It goes with everything. I dig it to the health system. So what the future plans? Pandemic reveal lots of truths, including this one, the free market. I mean, there's no absolutely free market. Pandemic shows it, and pandemic shows one thing: who received the biggest money from the governments, the big corporations, right? So who saved the crisis in 2008? Who helped? The governments helped to the banks, to big money. So just to come back to a health system and approach to health protection in this region, which is, I recently read that Bulgaria and Serbia are two countries in Europe spending most money on the private care, using a private health system. Meaning, not that we have that much money for this, meaning that the state health system is in a crisis, and the state pushing it to that you spend money in the private sector instead of helping to have a more efficient system. So in the future, I was looking at television that it's going to be one box, for example. I saw it in France, and you go there, you don't have to go to a doctor. You go there, you sit, you put your finger something, your blood pressure goes, then they send a message to a doctor, then you have a pulse and doctor, etc., etc. How many boxes are going to be around?
It's stress providing.
Exactly.
Go
Exactly.
back to the topic of platform work in the region. I know it's like it's looping. I know that it is coming to.
So yeah, it's interconnected with
Mhm.
everything, really with everything. But I don't want to see future when you can buy this box and have it in your flat, and other ones going to do God knows what. And it's also a question of social mobility. With the skills, what can you do? Because as we mentioned in our region, lots of people with a faculty degree, they're doing jobs which are not, they're losing the skills, etc. So this also narrows social mobility, because your education should give you at least chance to go up on the social scale, right? But with this doesn't mean.
Okay.
It's going to be, I have a school just for private pleasure.
Okay, now practical question again, and this is the end of the panel. What would be your recommendation with? And also the same question for Ivona, because and I'm going to ask the same question for someone else. But labor rights.
Yeah, labor rights. So we didn't touch on my favorite topic on AI at all.
Yeah, true. You can now integrate.
Can I plug it in? Because I really want to talk about AI. Because I think we're talking about platforms, but that convention in Geneva, it's in the name of the conference, right? So, so in any case, I mean, and again, I have a disclaimer before this. I work every day with AI. I work on government policy. I work hands-on on code and everything in between. I'm a very big AI fanboy, and I believe really that it holds the potential to help us solve a lot of issues. However, in order to do so, we do really need to take off the rose-colored glasses. And my hook to the platforms is that they are digital entities. I will link the AI back to them. And we need to acknowledge all of the very predictable effects that this technology is going to have on our societies. And people say like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen. Oh, the future is uncertain. We know pretty well what's going to happen with AI. Just we need to acknowledge one simple fact, the elephant in the room I always call it, AI is productive capital. It's productive capital that boosts productivity. We have seen this before. on our planet. We know what kind of happens when you get an influx of productive capital. And it behaves like capital. It has an owner, it depreciates, it's a thing, it increases productivity, it replaces workers, right? So, I mean, there's a couple of things that we know are going to happen with AI coming right now, right? And I mean, as somebody who's really, really engaged in AI, I can tell you that even if AI stops developing right now, just the technology we have already, just disseminating throughout the world, we will reach this transformation. It's pretty wild. So the first thing is increased productivity and wealth, right? People become more productive, so we have more stuff. I'll get to the caveats, right? We have more stuff, there's more stuff to go around, everybody gets wealthier, right? The population at large as well, everybody's happy, there's more things. People think that they're going to spend more time with their family. Usually when we have to choose between time and more stuff, we choose more stuff. But okay, there's that option as well. There's going to be increased within country inequality. Again, this is mathematical. If an AI replaces 50 workers and, you know, it has less than 50 owners, you know, it's going to lead to inequality. Usually tends to do that. It's going to increase between country inequality, right? So the biggest driver of between country inequality, we here in the West, okay, in the partly West and the West, we like to think about education, that's why we're so productive. It's not, it's access to capital. My education doesn't mean anything if you put me in Kenya on a subsistence farm, right? So it's access to capital. So it's going to cause big inequalities between countries, and it's going to transform the labor market, very significantly so. So jobs are going to disappear, boring jobs are going to disappear, interesting jobs are going to come up. So this is generally a good thing when you ask economists. The only issue with this is it's going to happen really quickly, right? So we know it's going to happen very quickly because the entire infrastructure, digital infrastructure of the world is in microservices. All of our jobs, all of these high-paying jobs that the AI is going to replace are generally hooked onto the cloud and computers. You can just plug it in. And this is my challenge to fellow economists to discuss in terms of productivity. So consider the mechanization of Europe, right, of the agriculture in Europe that happened from the late 19th century till the, let's say, the 70s. I'll get that. So back then it was, you know, late 19th century, you needed 150 hours of labor to work a hectare of land, of wheat. In the 1970s, that was 10 hours of labor. So that's a 15x productivity gain, which is, I think, in my personal experience, what AI will do to the jobs that it comes into. 15 times more productivity. That means holding the land constant, 95% of the laborers on the land are redundant. Now, can you imagine that the mechanization of agriculture did not happen over 100 years, but it happened over 10 years? What would happen in Europe? Lots of pitchforks and torches and angry people. So it's like systems can change, but if the change is too quick, it becomes trauma. Our body works the same way as well. So, you know, every country needs to prepare for this. So I'm a big optimist for AI, but we need to prepare for that. I think platform work is going to play a big role in that as well. But for instance, we are working with the AI strategy, the new one here in Serbia. We have measures already in place that are going to track the labor market, going to think of reskilling, upskilling to the extent that we can afford it here in this context. But these are things that we're trying to anticipate with future policy. And I think that in context of platforms, I'm not coming here, I think AI can actually really help, right? So what we heard yesterday also from Mark and also today for Vasil talking about labor regulations is that it's very hard to enforce. You can have the best labor laws and policies and what have you, they're very hard to enforce. Platforms, by the fact that they're digital, you know, you can use AI to enforce these policies. AI lowers the costs of creating applications that do complex things. For instance, if you want to monitor apps, whether they're, you know, they're into labor laws for deliverers, delivery workers can install another app from a trade union that's now very cheap to develop. In a year, it's going to be really cheap to develop. And then you can follow whether they're getting those calls. You can actually monitor from the other end. A lot of monitoring tools for enforcement of these things become increasingly affordable. Things that you couldn't make 2 years ago, in a year's time, they're going to be very
You're
cheap.
really an optimist. I can say it's.
I'm talking about when we come with policy and we come with laws and regulations, a very real concern, and this is something that we see in practice all the time. Vasil named it, I guess everybody here will agree. It's very hard to enforce. So if you lower the cost of enforcement of a certain policy, and AI can really do that, you can effectively enforce the policy.
Okay, we meet in 4 years' time to see if it happened. because that is how things go. So I will stop here and just ask last question to Ivona. Having heard all this and going back to the research that you carried out and knowing the platform workers here in this region, so what would be your advice when it comes to skills, careers, what they should do? Should they stay in platform economy? Should they maybe now start looking for some other jobs and maybe even leave this region because it is better to do so now than later?
Well, that's a very difficult question, and to give advice, it depends on the context as well. But again, I would like to underline that what we are seeing is that policies matter. So when you have good policies that are implemented and then also controlled, they do make effect at the national level, but also at a bigger level when you have association of countries, for example. So I would say that this is very important. I would actually disagree. I strongly believe, and this is very much seen in our research, that education matters as well. So even if, well, you might be highly educated in IT or financial sector, and suddenly you go to Kenya and you work in a farm, then you would probably better know how to access capital. You would probably better know how to use digitalization also to implement on your farm. So I would still say that the education and training very much matter. And then last point that I would like to bring also why platforms actually has grown so prominently. There is an issue of trust. And there in the platforms, there is an issue of trust that the customer will receive a service and that the worker that will be paid. So this is in theory. So I also believe that, and this is going to be very trivial, the more platform work visible, and the more we discuss, the more we bring transparency and trust between different players, the better. Because actually platform work also follows the directions of a global economy in other sectors as well. In digital world, you have a few companies that actually are leading, Microsoft, Google, etc., and they monopolize the market. This is also happening with all unicorns that are now appearing. They are immediately bought by big companies, and this is why monopolies are created. But this is why I still believe, and well, if we can have even this bigger discussion also at the level of ILO for the protection of workers, for me, this element of trust of the discussion between different players is very important. And also strong push from the level of customers. So something that we very much underestimate, that customers can actually make a change as well. And this we ought, for example, observe very much with the greening of the economies, with climate change. If it was not because of a very, very strong push of young people, to be honest, and this is also my trust in young people, in the new generations, for whom the planet is more important, so the global level is more important, but also the quality of life is more important, and actually them are much more optimistic about the future. The impact of AI, we need to still assess it. We are already seeing that also when it comes to demand of work, and it may happen that also for digital skills, the demand for work may change. Like, for example, writing, yes, exactly. Yeah. Writing and translation can be overtaken by AI. Coding can be overtaken by AI. So we need to see the impact of AI. A very, very good point also about this educating and preparing how to control AI and how then we can trust AI. Do we trust AI? I think we don't yet, because also there is a lot of lie when it comes to AI.
Okay, but going
But
back,
then, yes, yes,
to this panel, going
yes,
back
this
to
is
platform work,
going back to the
So-
region. Going back to the region, should I stay or should I go? What we already see, well, maybe a particular case of Albania, that really the trend is more outward migration for young people. When it comes to other countries, actually, this is not the case. So what is happening? Well, we need to create good conditions at country level also for people to stay. And this is why policies are so important for that. And we need to recognize the work that people are delivering. We need to recognize their skills, because actually this is what people want. So when they go to a bank, that they can have a certificate that, yes, they are working and they can pay their mortgage, because this is actually the big worry of people. Whether to continue work, well, it depends obviously on the conditions that you have. But what would be very, very important, linked with this recognition, is that people have a choice, and very often people do not have a choice. So what we need to do, exactly as you know, this is a call also for policymakers. We need to create conditions for people to make a choice, where to work, how to work, the choice of quality of life. And this would be the most important.
Okay, so thank you. I hope that we can conclude now with this undecisive. I try to kind of understand, should they stay, should they leave, but no answer. So it is up to you to decide what's going to happen and what platform workers should do. I'm leaving you with these questions, and thank you to my panelists. Thank you for highlighting this complexity